and our fantastic panelists. So maybe I'll start. I was starting already introducing Sarah Van Bukut, who will join us online from Southeast Asia. Sarah leads the Incubation Network's Leakage and Livelihoods program in South and Southeast Asia. I'll just introduce briefly all the panelists, and then we'll get started with the session. Maria Soledad Mella Vidal, here with us at the podium. She's the environmental activist and recycler from Chile, and currently is the president of the Chilean National Association of Recyclers. Welcome, Soledad. Also online, we will follow with our colleague from the International Labor Organization, Mustafa Kamal Gay, who is the coordinator of the Green Jobs program at the International Labor Organization at the ILO. And last but not least, here also with us on stage is Griffins Ochieng, who is the director of the Center for Environmental Justice and Development in Kenya. So, all panelists presented, and all of you participants, welcome. Again, thank you very much for your presence here. We will get started, and I would really like to start first by introducing then our panelists from online, Sarah Van Bukut, who I trust the connection is all working. I still don't see you online, or I don't.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Fantastic. Oh, great.
Oh.
So now we see you. We still don't hear you.
Hello? You can't hear me?
The sound was working before, but
Hello?
Can you try unmuting yourself, or colleagues? Maybe we need to unmute.
Everyone in the online chat is saying that they can hear me.
It's good. I think the sound was not high. The sound was not good enough in the Great.
Okay.
But excellent. So Sarah, just as a starter, if you could tell us a bit how you optimize plastic waste management and advance the circular economy in an inclusive way in Southeast Asia. You can tell us about this example. Also, again, please, trying to keep your time. Thank you.
Sure. Well, that's certainly not something that I do single-handedly, but thank you so much. I'm honored to be here and to be part of this very important discussion. My name is Sarah Van Bukut. I'm a program manager at the Incubation Network, and yes, I'm dialing in from Singapore today. Just very briefly, for some background, the Incubation Network is an impact-driven initiative that sources and scales innovative solutions to combat plastic pollution in South and Southeast Asia. And our approach to doing so is really by focusing on strengthening the entrepreneurial ecosystems across our 5 target countries, which are India, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And what we've really kept at the forefront of our work over the past 2 years or so, and will continue to focus on going forward, is, and what is really relevant to today's discussion, is to ensure that, you know, while we're supporting these market-based solutions, the innovation and the circular economy, we're not leaving behind or further disadvantaging the marginalized populations that are really at the front line of plastic waste recovery, as we know, and make solutions like recycling possible in the first place. So we're really focused on supporting gender-forward business models, and in a more targeted way, we're currently running 2 programs within our Inclusive Markets workstream. One is Leakage and Livelihoods, and the other is Equality in Plastics Circularity. And they're really focused on piloting solutions that integrate informal waste workers, as well as other solutions that address gender inequalities that are embedded across broader value chains. So within those 2 particular programs, we now have 15 partners in the region that are a mix of startups, SMEs, and civil society organizations that the Incubation Network is supporting with funding, technical assistance, and mentoring. And those partners are really the experts on the ground who are driving the change, developing frameworks, best practices, and, you know, I'm really just here representing them tonight, or doing my best. We're relatively early, I would say, in our development of kind of findings and insights, but we have grown increasingly confident that we cannot prevent plastic leakage without addressing the need to develop systems and approaches that ensure the safety and livelihoods of waste workers. That's a certainty. And some of the solutions that our partners have been working on involve capacity building and capital expenditure or infrastructure development, to really leverage the innate entrepreneurial qualities of the waste workers in their communities so that they can run, self-sustaining facilities in a team of their own. Some solutions have involved digital technologies that help to make market information transparent and optimize collection. And many projects have also involved advocating on behalf of waste workers to governments, local governments, so that their contributions to the system are recognised and so that they can gain access to identification, insurance, and so on. And we've wrapped research agendas around these cohorts and these projects. And I mean, just briefly, what we've learned so far, first of all, time and flexible funding is required. We need our partners to be able to pivot as they learn and as we learn as funders as well. We've also learned that, at least in this region, maturity against the goals for a socially responsible supply chain is quite low across the board, which on a positive note makes it ripe for improvement and investment. We have learned that there is no cut and paste solution and that the needs and the ambitions of informal waste workers within each market can be very diverse, even within one region. Formalization is not always desirable, not always the desired outcome. In addition, the waste trade is very personal and trust is essential and can really take time. And I think the final thing I'll note is that even we've found, or our partners have shown us, that even the very smallest interventions can really have a significant impact on improving the livelihoods and the safety of informal waste workers. So something like providing a childcare facility so that more women can be working at a facility and to keep the children safe, or even just branded PPE, a reflective vest and an ID card and so on, in order to gain better access to certain spaces and to lessen the risk of harassment as well. So I'll leave it there, as I'm eager to hear from the others and to continue the conversation, but thank you for your attention.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah, for these initial words, and thank you also for keeping to time. That was super helpful. So now we'll follow with our second speaker, sorry, and we'll come back here in the room with Maria Soledad. So Maria Soledad, you were already introduced. Can I ask, how can the informal waste sector participate more meaningfully in the design of the transition to a circular economy? And yesterday, we already heard from the sector. We had very insightful presentations and comments. Please, what are your thoughts?
Hola a todos y a todas.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. The transition that we're all talking about is a significant process for the recyclers of the world. And I'm not speaking just on my behalf. I'm speaking for the 20 million recycles devoted to waste collection globally. In Latin America and the Caribbean, there are 4 million recyclers, and we've been making a living out of waste. I can say that we've been as smart as to feel that there was a certain moment where we couldn't make a living and we were able to find food in the street. Not food literally, but in waste. We've found a way to make a living and to bring food to our homes. And today we can see that waste management policies and procedures are implemented in our countries, but relevant stakeholders like us are not taken into account. We went on knocking on doors to beg for food. We went knocking on people's houses or the government to ask for food, but we found food in waste. Our friends, our colleagues live in dumpsters. They work in the landfills in infrahuman conditions. This is why the concept of transition is so important. We don't want that tomorrow when the landfills get closed or when waste management is privatized in the near future, that acquired right, historically speaking, is removed from us because there is a historical debt to recyclers. We've subsidized every country. It hasn't been the other way around. We've been the grantors of the countries, and every time we collect thousands and thousands of tons, preventing the waste to end up in a landfill or in the ocean, that's when we have subsidized the state, because in one way or another, we've provided them with economic relief, with economical relief. We have given value to what everybody called garbage. So money and eat food for our homes. That's what it has meant. And the transition is key, but that transition needs to come hand in hand. You cannot speak of a transition without talking to us, without discussing it with us. We don't want like the situation of other countries where miners no longer work in mines due to environmental reasons, and they're fully aware of that. But they'd rather not eat instead of going to work. We need an answer in the face of our needs. We cannot continue to uphold a model that doesn't have anything to do with us. We cannot continue to encourage this grave economic issue, because transition, pollution, waste is not only an environmental issue, it's also a social one. We're part and consequence of social issues. We're the consequence of economic models within our countries where people have not been able to work directly with poverty, and we're part of that poverty. We're part of the garbage, but we do not want to transform into garbage, because every time you go to a landfill or when you see a collector in the street, you think that they're garbage, that they're part of garbage. And that's why we're not part of the fair transition we're talking about. What is that fair, just transition? Whenever laws are implemented, we should also join the discussion to submit a bill. If this is the first time in the history of the world where recyclers have a voice, and we're not a small group, we're talking about 20 million. In my country, there are 18 million people. So it can be made up of a country, made up of recyclers. This is why it's so important that in the transition, we're part of the model, and that direct investment is made to recyclers. Today, we just saw our friend from Senegal who was talking about the projects implemented in the landfills. Significant projects are being implemented, but they're leaving out the free labor. The grassroots recyclers, we're not acknowledged as workers. We're not even recognized or acknowledged as people. You just think that there's a bunch of individuals doing something at a given space, but without any type of acknowledgement whatsoever. Recyclers are left out of project, and the institutions do not see recyclers as a key weapon for the transition of such an important topic. We're trying to fight plastic pollution. This happens in Senegal, this happens in Kenya, this happens in Panama, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and all over the world, because our historic work encompasses 5 generations, and we're under threat. This is why it's so important to take this major step. This is why it's so important to have this discussion. We need to tell you that we want the transition. We don't want more plastic to become richer, because we're not rich. It's totally the opposite. We're becoming poorer and poorer as we speak. Plastic pollution does not only affect some people, it affects the entire global population. It doesn't distinguish race or color or gender. It's an environmental damage for all of us. But the men and women, without knowing that we were doing this amazing job, we decided to collect waste and make a living out of it. We are aware, we're responsible, and we know that we're the heroes of the planet. A friend from Colombia was just telling me that we're like physicians, we're like doctors, because we're the only doctors who have been taking care of this planet. So this needs to be a fair transition, not only in terms of percentages, but due to human and social reasons. The baseline recyclers. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for bringing this voice loud and clear. And I think we're managing to get this message. So great to have you on the panel today. Let's follow with this first round of interventions from the speakers, and we're going back online now to hear from Mustafa Kamal Gay. from the ILO, the International Labour Organization. And Kamal, I hope you're online. I also don't see your screen, but hopefully you're connected. So hopefully you'll come online or on our screens also very soon. So can I ask you, what would be the new opportunities for decent work in a circular economy that embraces both environmental sustainability, but also social inclusion and poverty eradication? And maybe also, I mean, if you can start, what does decent work mean? So Kamal, the floor is yours. And also, I'm hoping that the connection is working. I don't see any indication of the contrary.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Perfect. We see you and we hear you very well.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having the International Labour Office join you in this session. I'm also happy to see some of my colleagues from our decent work team in Dakar in the room, and hopefully they will join us in the conversation. First of all, I just wanted to start by mentioning that the International Labour Organization is a tripartite organization of the UN system. Our constituents actually meeting just right now at the International Labour Conference in Geneva are representing governments, workers, and employers. So therefore, what we've just heard from Maria and all these workers are our constituents. When we speak of decent work, we mean employment that is productive, that allows an individual to have a dignified life with themselves and their families. We mean employment that provides for social security. We mean employment that provides rights at work and the right to engage in social dialogue. So the transition to a world free from plastic is a positive narrative. All the studies we've done at the ILO indicate that there is a huge potential for more and better jobs. We find that the shift to a circular economy could lead to some 80 million additional jobs by 2030. But there is also a risk of displacement of some over 70 million jobs if the right policies and processes are not in place to make that transition just and fair for all. And that is why the notion of a just transition is important. Just transition means content and it means process. It means content in the sense that we don't need only policies on the environmental side. We need policies on the industrial side. We need labor-based policies, skills development, enterprise development, enabling workers in the informal economy. And we know most of those handling plastic in our societies today operate in the informal setups. So enabling them to be working in decent working conditions. So there we maximize the opportunities for more and better jobs and minimize the risk of social disruption. Now, this has to be done in a process where those who are involved have to be part of it. And I know my trade union constituents like to say that if you are not at the table, you are the menu. So those workers in the informal economy have to be at the table discussing with governments, with employers, organizations, how to move out of plastic pollution in a way that generates opportunities for all. And I want to end by saying that we have frameworks to do that. There are several international labor standards that are relevant to the work of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, and they can be important elements in moving towards a global agreement on plastic. And I want to refer to the ILO guidelines for a just transition, which are tripartite sets of guidelines. They touch upon so many different areas of labor market policy that could be very useful in the work that brings us together here. Just want to end by saying that we very much look forward through the ILO tripartite constituents, governments, workers, and employers as active agents of change to work together towards a world that is free from pollution, but doing that in a way that generates decent work that achieves the Sustainable Development Goal 8 and all the other SDGs that are relevant to this agenda, taking a human-centered approach and involving all actors that have a role to play in this process. And I think that's what Executive Secretary Ines Inga Anderson has said yesterday, we need everyone to be part of this effort. So thank you very much, and looking forward to engaging in our conversation today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kamal. And yes, absolutely. We need everyone. And thanks for those clear messages as well on what we mean by this just transition. Apologies for the words. So let's follow now. In order to still have some time for discussion, let's follow with Griffin Zocheng. Griffin, how do we reduce the gap between, I mean, we've heard about the process, but how do we reduce the gap between the traditional decision makers and other parts of the society that still play, as we hear, a critical role in defining the transition to a circular economy?
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you very much for having me in this discussion. It's a very critical discussion at this point. I would say that in terms of reducing the gap, we need to, first of all, recognize the role that all stakeholders play. This involves the civil society organization, the informal sector workers, and all stakeholders. And in that recognition, integrate them in the discussions and create a platform where all these stakeholders and government or decision makers can come together to discuss the issues at hand. That gives opportunity for all these stakeholders to articulate the issues that need to be discussed and the solutions that are needed in order to be able to transition to a just and plastic-free economy. So one thing I want to flag is that even the inclusion, especially in the design of a circular economy approach, when we talk about design, we need to have involvement of all stakeholders at the initial stage. In terms of, for example, we know that the decision makers make laws, policies that touch on waste management, that integrate circular economy. At that point of the design, we need all the views on the opinion of all stakeholders, particularly the informal sector workers. Oftentimes, they have not been at the table discussing the solutions when it comes to implementation. But we expect that when those laws are made, that they are able to comply. And oftentimes we see non-compliance, and there is always the enforcement, which bring a stick, so to speak, in terms of ensuring that the laws are implemented that touches on waste management, for example. Besides the design, we also have implementation. Oftentimes we have various projects that addresses the issues of waste management, for example, that seek to protect health and safety when it comes to even in terms of 3R solution or circular economy. I've seen projects that are implemented to reduce, for example, open burning, which really affects the health of people working in the waste sector, especially in the dump site, among others. So in the implementation of these projects that are mainly sometimes implemented by decision makers, as part of implementing the laws and policies, we need to have the involvement of the traditional decision makers and all stakeholders coming together to discuss solutions towards transitioning to a just and plastic-free economy. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Griffins, also for sticking very strictly to time. So that was super helpful, because that will allow us maybe to have maybe 2 or 3 questions. And today we wanted actually to start online, because yesterday we didn't have many opportunities for that. So I see from colleagues that we already have one hand raised online. So maybe if I could ask Sudhabi Subrun from Mauritius. I think, colleagues, first we will need to unmute her, and Sudhabi, you will need also to unmute from your end. But if you could ask your question, please. We'll collect 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll go through the answers. Sudhabi, the floor is yours. I'm checking with colleagues if we have Sudhabi unmuted. Otherwise, also colleagues on the floor, I mean, if you want to speak, if you can raise your hand and keep it raised for a little while, we'll get back to you in a second. Okay, it seems we're having trouble with Sudhabi, so maybe we'll start. I saw a hand. Gentleman here, the 3rd row.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Tuo Kenya. I'm from Kenya, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. My question will be to all panelists. And the idea behind us congregating here is establishment of how we are going to move on forward in establishing this particular document that you're trying to come up with. So my question will be so much about how to ensure that we have a kind of a bottom-up approach. Because we realize that as much as we're talking about engaging all stakeholders, the most critical stakeholder is that everybody is actually, one way or another, involved in plastic pollution. So how do we come up with a document that is going to speak to the spirit of the individual, such that as opposed to the top-bottom approach of coming up with an international document, it's adopted, we come up with the national action plans, and then we have it at the subnational level being implemented, we have any citizen anywhere in the globe reading about the convention and decides to act on it without necessarily the top-bottom approach, but rather once I read it, I will be able to understand it and be able to implement it at my own individual level. So how do we come up with a document that speaks to the spirit of its objectives? That would be my question to all panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your interventions. If you can, thank you very much. I'm checking with my colleagues whether we can now bring Sudhabi. Yes? Thank you. Sudhabi, I see you on the screen, but we don't hear you. Maybe you still need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, now it's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For me, I am from Mauritius, and we have. Sorry, I think you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. In Mauritius, we have a lot of waste speakers who are involved in the collection of waste, but there should be some regulation that said that they are not having their health at stake, so that the ILO convention should take into consideration the health effect, the health of the waste speakers. So this has to be taken into consideration. And we also have in Mauritius a lot of people who are collecting their waste, the plastic waste, at individual levels, and these peoples also need to be taken on board in the convention. So all of the person that are involved in the picking of waste, of collecting of waste, are on board. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sudhabi. I think we still have several other questions. The time is now that we should actually be wrapping up, but maybe I'll allow just one more question from online, just to compensate. Yesterday we only had one question online, so we have one, please, very, very short question. Phong, if you could bring on the person who needs to speak. Okay, so apparently no questions. Then, if you don't mind, I'll maybe then move to wrapping up this session, as we actually have to close in time in order to. Sorry, we will not close the session because, of course, first I need to give the floor to our speakers to provide some comments on this question. So, if I could ask all of you. Just very, very brief remarks, making reference to the two questions that have been raised. So maybe we'll start following the opposite order. So Griffins, if you go first. Can we get the microphone for Griffins?
Yep. Yes, it's working now. Thank you so much for that question. I just want to respond to my colleague from Kenya, the question that he asked, how do we make this work from a bottom-up kind of approach? I think as citizens or individuals or sectors, we are organized in some form in different sectors. And where we are not, I think there's need for a deliberate effort to try and stimulate some organizing. And this has happened, for example, in our country, Kenya, with the informal sector, waste pickers, for example. We have other sector, the transport sector, among others. And they somehow represent citizens' aspirations or individuals through those organized groups. Also, I would suggest that or propose that we use the existing structures. We have opinion leaders in communities or in societies. We have the churches, the faith-based organization. How we can be, I wish how we could be able to engage in matters of environment as well in terms of development of the laws. Now that we are making this international law, which will be domesticated at the national level through the national action plans, among others. And these action plans have specific activities that we need to engage all stakeholders, including individual citizens, to engage. So I would think that we need to create awareness using those existing structures, but also through organized sectors, which has associations or groups or labor organizations, for them to, their voices are part of the conversation in the design of the laws, as well as in the implementation of those laws, including the action plan. That way, the implementation will cover or the aspirations of all citizens, including groups and specific interests that need to be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Griffins. That was very comprehensive. Mustafa, I'm going to come to you now. If you can provide also some comments based on the questions. Very, very brief, please. Sorry.
Thank you. So very briefly, I just wanted to say that to get everybody on board requires multi-layer partnerships. And for example, in collaboration with UNEP, UNDP, UNIDO, and UNITAR on the Partnership for Action on the Green Economy, we're working with the WIEGO and waste informal waste collectors in Babas in Senegal. Perhaps my colleagues can talk more about it. But just that kind of multi-layer engagement, UN system, national government, actors, associations, we can work together. I just wanted to end by saying that enterprises have an important role to play. We spoke a lot about workers, but let's not forget the important role of enterprises in moving towards a plastic pollution-free world.
Excellent. Thank you so much for those remarks. So we're now coming back to the floor. María Soledad.
Okay.
Your question, the question from Kenya, has to do with the transient nature of the work we're doing, and this is to be binding, participative, and democratic. The civil society has much of a say, not only the private sector. We've always listened to the private sector. We've always listened to the states. We have not listened to the civil society. We have not listened to citizens, to the general population, because they have much to say. NGOs, institutions, environmental activists have much to say in this process. This is what the recent proposal is so important. It needs to be a bottom-up approach and not as it has usually been, a top-down approach, because we're the voice. We are the majority, and you need to listen to the majority, and everything needs to come in consultation. Decisions made here must be consulted. It needs to be part of the social of the civil society's decision making. Not only the government, not only the states, not only the private sector, but the civil society are key, and we endure the actual impact because the backyard is usually the poorest area of your house of these countries, and you do not take into account our opinions. You don't take into account what the impact is on us. Thank you very much.
Sarah, for some final brief remarks, and then we'll wrap up the session.
Sure, thanks so much. And I think that the diversity of the answers provided so far is just such a beautiful illustration of the complexity of the plastic pollution issue and the fact that no one actor in the ecosystem has the resources to solve it alone. I think on a more sort of practical note from our side, when we think about the supporting bottom-up approaches at the Incubation Network, we're always quite focused as well on the nature and the size of the funding that we provide. And I think where we come in is providing that right-sized, actually relatively small funding for locally contextualized on the ground experiments that can be quite small scale, that can be very flexible. And then, as we are figuring out what is working, then we can, seek further investment for the things that are highly impactful and have the potential to scale. So that's just another, another word to add into the mix is just the nature of the funding that is available and providing for right-sized, flexible solutions for the work that's being done on the ground.
Excellent. Thanks again for those remarks. So we've now come to the end of the session. We still have to finish on time, otherwise we'll be told off by our colleagues. We need to move back to the plenary, but before that, let me give you some closing remarks prepared very kindly by my colleagues online. So what we've seen in this session, I mean, the key messages that we've heard are that a fair, just, and inclusive transition towards a plastic circular economy is fundamental to successfully address the plastic pollution crisis that we currently face, which affects us all. A just transition means content, we have heard, such as policies on environment, labor-based policies, skills development, enabling workers. So content, but also a process in which those that are affected are involved. Policies that strengthen the entrepreneurial ecosystem and integrate the informal waste management sector need to be developed and should create new opportunities for more and better jobs. In a circular economy that embraces environmental sustainability, social inclusion, and poverty eradication. So, second, very important message. Third, leveraging entrepreneurship will also require capacity building and digital technologies for transparency and market access, supported by flexible funding. And finally, the informal waste management sector and civil society stakeholders must be able to participate in a meaningful way to help shape the transition to a plastic pollution-free economy. I hope you will see many of the points that were addressed today and that you will see them well reflected in these points. With that, again, I want to deeply thank you for rushing your lunch, for coming here, all those online as well for your patience with the minor technical glitches. And again, encourage you to attend again, well, obviously the plenary right now, for those of you who can follow it, but also the next plenary, the next dialogue tomorrow at lunchtime at 2 Greenwich Mean Time. So we'll be here again at the same time. Thanks again and have a great rest of the day.